The summer of 1985 was brutally hot at Naval Air Station Pensacola, where 8-year-old Marcus Rodriguez spent his days drawing fighter jets while his father completed advanced flight training. The base housing felt like an oven, but Marcus didn't mind. He had discovered something more fascinating than the oppressive Florida heat. His new neighbor, Sarah Mitchell, whose father was also a naval aviator going through the same rigorous program. Sarah was different from other kids Marcus had known during his family's frequent moves. She didn't wrinkle her nose at his detailed sketches of F-14 Tomcats and F-18 Hornets. Instead, she sat cross-legged on his bedroom floor, carefully coloring within the lines of his drawings while he explained the difference between air-to-air and air-to-ground missiles. Her blonde pigtails bounced as she nodded seriously, absorbing every word like she was studying for a test. "My dad says these jets can go faster than sound," Marcus announced proudly, holding up his latest creation, a sleek F-18 with exaggerated wings and a fierce eagle painted on the nose. "That's called supersonic." Sarah looked up from her coloring, green eyes bright with curiosity. "Really? Faster than sound? How do you know when you break it?" Marcus puffed out his chest. "There's this big boom, like thunder, but way louder. My dad heard it once when he was watching the Blue Angels practice. They spent hours that summer perfecting their aircraft designs. Marcus drew the jets with technical precision that impressed even the adults, while Sarah added creative touches, stars, lightning bolts, and her favorite, a small cartoon eagle that she claimed brought good luck. She was surprisingly artistic for an 8-year-old, with steady hands that could add intricate details without smudging. "You should be a pilot too," Marcus told her one afternoon as they watched actual F-18s practice overhead, their engines screaming across the azure sky. "Girls can fly jets now. My dad told me." Sarah beamed. "Really? I want to fly the one with the eagle on it." She pointed to his drawing taped to the wall. "The one you drew for me." Marcus carefully removed the drawing from the wall and signed it with a flourish. "For Sarah, the best pilot I know. Your friend always, Marcus." He handed it to her solemnly. "When you become a real pilot, you have to put this on your jet. Promise." Sarah held the drawing like it was made of gold. "I promise. And when I do, I'll remember you drew it for me." That was the last summer they spent together. Marcus's father received orders to Norfolk, Virginia, while Sarah's family headed to San Diego. They exchanged addresses and promised to write, but military families moved frequently, and letters got lost in the shuffle of new schools, new friends, and new challenges. Marcus never forgot that summer, though. Even as he grew older and his drawings became more sophisticated, he remembered the girl who had shared his passion for aviation and made him feel less alone during another military relocation. Somewhere in the back of his mind, he always wondered what happened to Sarah Mitchell, and whether she had kept her promise about becoming a pilot. 23 years later, Lieutenant Commander Marcus Rodriguez was about to find out in the most terrifying way possible. Marcus had forgotten what it felt like to be truly afraid until his first combat mission over Iraq. The Persian Gulf stretched endlessly below his F-18 Super Hornet, a blue-green expanse that looked peaceful from 30,000 feet. But appearances were deceiving. Down there, enemy forces were repositioning, and intelligence suggested they had acquired aircraft that could pose a serious threat to Allied operations. He adjusted his oxygen mask and checked his instruments for the 100th time. The HUD display showed green across the board, but his palms were sweating inside his flight gloves. This wasn't like the training missions back at Lemoore or the simulated combat exercises in Nevada. This was real, and people were going to die today. "Ghost Leader, this is Ghost 2, came the voice of Major David Chen, his wingman and closest friend in the squadron. "How you holding up over there, Hawk?" Marcus smiled despite his nerves. David had been calling him Hawk since flight school, claiming Marcus had the sharpest eyes in their class. The nickname stuck, though Marcus never felt particularly hawk-like. Right now, he felt more like a very nervous young man strapped to 30 tons of sophisticated weaponry, trying not to think about his mother's last letter. "Solid copy, Ghost 2. Just admiring the scenery," Marcus replied, keeping his voice steady. "You ever think about what we're doing down here?" "You mean besides following orders and trying not to get shot down?" David's tone was light, but Marcus could hear the tension underneath. They'd been friends long enough to read each other's moods, even through radio static. "I mean, we're about to engage people we've never met, in a conflict most Americans can't even locate on a map." Marcus adjusted his grip on the stick. "Sometimes I wonder if my dad ever had these thoughts." David was quiet for a moment. Marcus's father had been shot down over Vietnam in 1971, when Marcus was barely 2 years old. He'd spent 6 years in a prisoner of war camp, an experience that had shaped Marcus's entire childhood. The old man rarely talked about his time in captivity, but Marcus had seen the way his hands sometimes shook when jets flew overhead. "Your dad was a hero, Hawk. He did his job just like we're doing ours." David's voice was gentle but firm. "The difference is, he didn't have all this fancy equipment to keep him safe." Marcus glanced at the multi-million-dollar aircraft surrounding him. The F-18 was a marvel of engineering, capable of speeds exceeding Mach 1.8 and carrying enough ordnance to level a city block. But all that technology couldn't eliminate the human element, the split-second decisions that determined who lived and who died. "Ghost Leader, Ghost 2, this is Control," came the voice of their mission commander, Colonel James Harrison. We have updated intelligence on enemy aircraft in your area. Maintain current heading and altitude. Rules of engagement are weapons-free on positive identification. Marcus felt his stomach tighten. Weapons-free meant they were cleared to engage any aircraft that posed a threat. But identification could be tricky, especially when enemy forces were known to use captured Allied equipment. The mission was supposed to be straightforward. Patrol the designated airspace, identify any hostile aircraft, and eliminate them before they could threaten Allied ground forces. Intelligence had been tracking a group of enemy jets that had been harassing supply convoys, and today's patrol was meant to send a message. Marcus pushed aside his philosophical concerns and focused on the job at hand. Below them, the war continued, and people on both sides were counting on them to do their duty. He thought briefly of that 8-year-old boy drawing fighter jets in Florida, dreaming of becoming a pilot. That boy had never imagined the weight of responsibility that came with turning those dreams into reality. Ghost 2, let's tighten up formation, Marcus ordered, settling into the familiar rhythm of military procedure. Keep your eyes peeled. Something tells me this is going to be a very long day. The morning sun climbed higher over the Persian Gulf, casting long shadows across the carrier deck of the USS Abraham Lincoln. Sarah Mitchell adjusted her helmet and ran through her pre-flight checklist one final time. As the commanding officer of VFA 147, the Argonauts, she had flown this routine hundreds of times, but today felt different. Intelligence briefings had been increasingly urgent, and everyone on board knew that major operations were imminent. "Skipper, you ready for another milk run?" asked Lieutenant Commander Tom Bradley, her executive officer and longtime friend. Tom had been flying with Sarah for 3 years, and his easy humor had kept squadron morale high during their extended deployment. Sarah smiled, though she felt the familiar knot of tension in her stomach. "Just another day at the office, Tom, though I have a feeling this one might be more interesting than usual." She climbed into the cockpit of her F-18, callsign Argonaut 1, and began the complex startup sequence that would bring 30 tons of aircraft to life. The jet had been her home away from home for the past 6 months, and she knew every switch, every indicator, every sound it made. But today, something felt off. During the pre-flight inspection, her crew chief, Petty Officer First Class Rodriguez, no relation to Marcus, though the name always made her pause, had pointed out some unusual wear patterns on the aircraft's communication equipment. Nothing that would ground the jet, but enough to warrant keeping a close eye on radio performance. "Probably just the salt air," Rodriguez had said, but Sarah detected concern in his voice. Equipment failures in combat zones could be fatal, and everyone knew it. Sarah strapped herself in and began the engine startup sequence. The twin turbofans spooled up with their characteristic whine, and within minutes, she was ready for launch. The catapult officer gave the thumbs up, and Sarah felt the familiar surge of acceleration as the steam catapult hurled her aircraft from 0 to 150 miles per hour in less than 3 seconds. Once airborne, she formed up with the rest of her squadron and began the transit to their assigned patrol area. The mission was similar to dozens of others they'd flown. Establish air superiority in a contested zone and prevent enemy aircraft from threatening Allied ground operations. What Sarah didn't know was that a series of communication failures and intelligence errors had created a perfect storm of confusion. Her squadron had been assigned to patrol the same airspace as another unit, but due to a corrupted message transmission, each group believed they were operating alone. Even worse, enemy forces had been monitoring Allied communications and had deliberately created false radio traffic to increase the confusion. Argonaut 1, this is Control, came the voice of her mission commander. We have reports of enemy aircraft in your vicinity. Maintain current heading and be prepared to engage on my command. Sarah acknowledged the transmission and began scanning the skies around her. The Persian Gulf was vast, and even with all their sophisticated radar equipment, visual identification was still critical. She thought about the countless hours she'd spent studying aircraft recognition charts, memorizing the subtle differences between Allied and enemy jets. In the distance, she spotted a formation of aircraft heading in their direction. Her radar operator identified them as F-18s, which should have been reassuring. But something about their approach pattern seemed wrong. They were coming in fast and low, using attack formation tactics that suggested hostile intent. Argonaut Flight, this is Lead, Sarah transmitted to her squadron. I have multiple contacts bearing 270, range 15 miles and closing. Appears to be F-18s, but approach profile suggests hostile intent. The next few minutes would determine whether years of training and preparation had been enough to prevent a catastrophe that would haunt everyone involved for the rest of their lives. The radar scope in Marcus's cockpit showed multiple contacts approaching from the southeast, and the hair on the back of his neck stood up. According to intelligence briefings, no Allied aircraft were supposed to be operating in this sector. Yet the radar signatures looked exactly like F-18 Super Hornets, aircraft identical to the one he was flying. Ghost Leader, Ghost 2, David's voice crackled through the radio. I'm seeing the same thing you are. 4 contacts, F-18 configuration, but they're not responding to IFF interrogation. Marcus frowned. IFF, identification friend or foe, was supposed to prevent exactly this kind of situation. Every Allied aircraft carried transponders that would automatically identify them as friendly when interrogated by radar. If these jets weren't responding, it meant either their equipment was malfunctioning or they were enemy aircraft. "Control, this is Ghost Leader," Marcus transmitted. "We have 4 contacts, bearing 110, range 12 miles. Aircraft appear to be F-18s, but negative IFF response. Request clarification on friendly aircraft in the area." The response came back quickly. "Ghost Leader, Control. No Allied aircraft are authorized in your sector. You are cleared to engage any aircraft that pose a threat to your mission." Marcus felt his mouth go dry. The rules of engagement were clear. He was authorized to fire on any aircraft that threatened his mission or his wingman. But something about this situation felt wrong. Why would enemy forces be flying F-18s? And why weren't they attempting to evade or show hostile intent? "Ghost 2, let's close the distance and attempt visual identification," Marcus ordered. "Keep your finger off the trigger until we know what we're dealing with." As they approached the unknown aircraft, Marcus could see them more clearly through his canopy. They were definitely F-18s, but something was different about their markings. These jets had been painted in a non-standard camouflage pattern, and their squadron insignia had been altered or removed entirely. "Ghost Leader, those are definitely Super Hornets," David confirmed. "But I can't make out their nationality markings. Wait, I'm seeing what looks like nose art on the lead aircraft." Marcus adjusted his position to get a better view of the lead enemy jet. Through his binoculars, he could just make out some kind of artwork painted on the aircraft's nose. It looked like a cartoon eagle, crudely drawn but somehow familiar. "Control, Ghost Leader," Marcus transmitted. "We have visual contact with 4 F-18s, unknown nationality. They appear to be maintaining course and speed. No apparent hostile intent at this time." "Ghost Leader, Control. Intelligence indicates these aircraft have been harassing our supply convoys. You are cleared to engage. Repeat, you are cleared to engage." Marcus felt the weight of the moment settling on his shoulders. In a few seconds, he would have to make a decision that would determine whether 4 people lived or died. The aircraft in front of him were clearly military, clearly capable of causing harm to Allied forces. But something about the situation still felt wrong. He thought about his father, shot down over Vietnam while following similar orders. He thought about the oath he'd taken when he received his commission, to defend his country and follow the orders of his superior officers. But he also thought about the responsibility that came with having the power to take human lives. "Ghost 2, arm your weapons," Marcus ordered reluctantly. "We're going to close to firing range and make one more attempt at radio contact." As they approached the unknown aircraft, Marcus couldn't shake the feeling that he was about to make a terrible mistake. The cartoon eagle on the lead jet's nose seemed to stare at him accusingly, as if reminding him of something he'd forgotten long ago. Sarah saw the two F-18s approaching her formation and felt her heart rate spike. Their approach pattern was aggressive, and she could see that their weapon systems were armed and ready. Either these were enemy aircraft preparing to attack, or there had been a massive communication failure somewhere in the chain of command. "Argonaut Flight, this is lead," she transmitted to her squadron. "We have two F-18s approaching from the northwest. They appear to be targeting us. Prepare for evasive maneuvers." She tried switching to the guard frequency, the emergency channel monitored by all Allied aircraft. "Unknown F-18s approaching from the northwest. This is U.S. Navy Flight Argonaut 1. Identify yourself immediately." There was no response. Either the approaching aircraft couldn't hear her transmission, or they were maintaining radio silence for tactical reasons. Sarah felt the familiar calm that came over her in dangerous situations, the product of thousands of hours of training and countless combat missions. "Argonaut 2, 3, 4, break formation and prepare for defensive maneuvers," she ordered. "We're going to try to avoid engagement, but be ready to defend yourselves if necessary." The approaching aircraft continued to close the distance, and Sarah could see the lead pilot clearly now. He was wearing a standard U.S. Navy flight helmet and oxygen mask, but that didn't necessarily mean anything. Enemy forces were known to use captured equipment, and pilot uniforms were easily replicated. What troubled Sarah most was the professional manner of their approach. These weren't amateur pilots flying stolen aircraft. Their formation was tight, their approach was calculated, and their weapons positioning suggested extensive training on F-18 systems. This was either a very sophisticated enemy operation, or something had gone terribly wrong with Allied coordination. "Control, this is Argonaut 1, Sarah transmitted. "We have two F-18s approaching our position with apparent hostile intent. They are not responding to radio calls. Request immediate clarification on Allied aircraft in our sector." The response was immediate and chilling. "Argonaut 1, control. No Allied aircraft are authorized in your area. You are cleared to engage any threats to your mission." Sarah felt her blood run cold. If no Allied aircraft were supposed to be in this area, then the jets approaching her formation were either enemy aircraft or Allied aircraft that had somehow become separated from their assigned patrol areas. Either way, the situation was rapidly spiraling out of control. She thought about her crew, Tom Bradley flying wing, Lieutenant Jennifer Walsh on her first combat deployment, and Lieutenant Commander Mike Santos, a veteran pilot with two children back in San Diego. All of them were depending on her to make the right decision in the next few seconds. Argonaut flight, weapons free, she ordered reluctantly. Engage only if directly threatened, but defend yourselves if necessary. As the approaching aircraft closed to within firing range, Sarah caught a glimpse of the lead pilot's face through his canopy. Something about his features seemed familiar, though she couldn't place where she might have seen him before. The intensity of his gaze reminded her of someone from her past, but combat situations weren't the time for nostalgic memories. What she didn't notice was that the cartoon eagle painted on her jet's nose, the same drawing she'd carried with her through 15 years of military service, was clearly visible to the approaching aircraft. The drawing that 8-year-old Marcus Rodriguez had signed for Sarah, the best pilot I know, was about to save both their lives. Marcus brought his F-18 to within 500 yards of the lead enemy aircraft, close enough to see the pilot's face clearly. The unknown pilot appeared to be scanning the area, searching for threats, but hadn't taken any obviously hostile action. Marcus could see that the aircraft's weapons were armed, but so were his own. "Ghost Leader, this is Control," came the urgent voice of Colonel Harrison. "We're tracking multiple aircraft in your area. What's your status?" "Control, Ghost Leader," Marcus replied, his voice tight with tension. "We have visual contact with 4 F-18s, unknown nationality. They appear to be maintaining defensive posture. No hostile acts observed at this time." "Ghost Leader, those aircraft have been identified as hostile. You are directed to engage immediately. Repeat, you are directed to engage immediately." Marcus felt the familiar surge of adrenaline that accompanied combat situations. His training told him to follow orders without question, but his instincts were screaming that something was wrong. The aircraft in front of him were clearly F-18s, but their behavior didn't match that of enemy pilots. "Ghost 2, do you have a clear shot on the lead aircraft?" Marcus asked. "Affirmative, Ghost Leader. I have tone and am ready to engage on your command." Marcus centered his targeting reticle on the lead enemy aircraft and felt his finger hover over the trigger. All he had to do was squeeze, and a heat-seeking missile would streak across the sky and eliminate the threat. It would be over in seconds, and his mission would be complete. But as he prepared to fire, something caught his eye on the enemy aircraft's nose. There was definitely artwork there, not the usual military insignia, but something more personal. Through his targeting scope, he could make out the details more clearly now. It was a cartoon eagle, drawn in a childlike style that seemed oddly familiar. Marcus felt a chill run down his spine. The eagle looked exactly like the drawings he used to make as a child, sitting on his bedroom floor with his neighbor Sarah Mitchell. But that was impossible. Sarah was just a childhood friend from Florida, someone he'd lost touch with decades ago. "Ghost Leader, Control, what's your status?" We need those aircraft neutralized immediately." Marcus ignored the radio call and focused on the artwork. As he looked closer, he could see that it wasn't just similar to his childhood drawings. It was identical. The wings were positioned at exactly the same angle. The beak had the same exaggerated curve, and the talons were drawn with the same attention to detail that had impressed adults when he was 8 years old. "Ghost 2, hold your fire," Marcus ordered suddenly. "I need to verify something." "Ghost Leader, control. You are ordered to engage immediately. Those aircraft pose a direct threat to Allied forces." Marcus switched to the guard frequency and keyed his microphone. "Unknown F-18. This is U.S. Navy Flight Ghost Leader. If you can hear this transmission, please respond immediately. I say again, please respond immediately." For a moment, there was only static. Then, a voice came through the radio that made Marcus's heart skip a beat. It was a woman's voice, professional and calm, but with an accent that reminded him of long summer days in Florida. "Ghost Leader, this is U.S. Navy Flight Argonaut 1. We are American aircraft on assigned patrol. Please identify yourself and your intentions." Marcus felt the world tilt on its axis. The voice was older, more mature, but he recognized it immediately. It was Sarah Mitchell, the girl who had colored his drawings and promised to become a pilot. She was here, in the Persian Gulf, flying the F-18 he was about to shoot down. "Argonaut 1, Ghost Leader," Marcus replied, his voice barely steady. "Sarah, is that you? This is Marcus Rodriguez, from Pensacola, 1985. The silence that followed seemed to last forever. Then Sarah's voice came back, filled with amazement and disbelief. "Marcus! Oh my God, Marcus, what are you doing here?" "The same thing you are, apparently," Marcus replied, his hands shaking as he disarmed his weapons systems. "Sarah, we need to sort this out immediately. We were about to engage your aircraft." "Ghost Leader, control. What's your status? Why haven't you engaged the hostile aircraft?" Marcus ignored the radio call and focused on the miracle that had just occurred. After 23 years, he and Sarah had found each other again, and a childhood promise had prevented a tragedy that would have haunted both of them forever. But as he looked at his radar screen, Marcus realized that their problems were far from over. The communication failures that had brought them to this point were still in effect, and other aircraft were approaching their position. Whatever had gone wrong with the command structure, it was bigger than just a simple misunderstanding. "Sarah, we need to get out of here," Marcus transmitted. "Something's not right with our communications, and I think we're about to have company." The reunion between Marcus and Sarah had prevented one tragedy, but it was about to reveal a much larger conspiracy that would shake the foundations of the military chain of command. The cartoon eagle that had saved their lives was about to become evidence in a case that would reach the highest levels of government. The realization that he had almost killed his childhood friend left Marcus feeling shaken and confused. As he flew in formation with Sarah's aircraft, maintaining a safe distance while they tried to sort out the communication failures, his mind raced through the implications of what had just happened. "Control, this is Ghost Leader," Marcus transmitted. "The aircraft we were tracking have been identified as friendly. U.S. Navy F-18s on assigned patrol. We need immediate clarification on our mission parameters." The response was immediate and angry. "Ghost Leader, Control. Those aircraft are hostile. You are ordered to engage immediately or face court-martial for failure to follow orders." Marcus felt a chill run down his spine. Colonel Harrison's voice carried a tone he'd never heard before, desperation mixed with something that sounded almost like panic. Why was command so insistent that he fire on aircraft that were clearly American? "Ghost 2, what's your take on this?" Marcus asked David privately. "Something's not right, Hawk," David replied. "I'm monitoring multiple radio frequencies, and I'm hearing contradictory orders from different command centers. It's like everyone's working from different intelligence reports." Sarah's voice came through the radio on the guard frequency. "Marcus, we need to compare notes. My squadron was told that no Allied aircraft were operating in this sector. Someone's feeding false information to at least one of our command centers." Marcus felt his stomach drop. If Sarah was right, then the near miss between their aircraft wasn't an accident. It was the result of deliberate misinformation. But who would benefit from American aircraft shooting at each other? "Argonaut 1, Ghost Leader," Marcus transmitted. "Let's head toward the carrier and try to sort this out with higher command. I don't like the smell of this situation." As they began flying toward the USS Abraham Lincoln, Marcus noticed additional aircraft appearing on his radar screen. These weren't F-18s. They were smaller, faster, and approaching from multiple directions. His targeting computer identified them as enemy fighters, but their approach pattern suggested they had been monitoring the radio traffic between American units. "Ghost Leader, Argonaut 1, Sarah's voice was tense. "I have multiple bogies approaching from the east. It looks like someone's been listening to our communications." Marcus realized with growing horror that they had been set up. The communication failures, the contradictory orders, the insistence that they fire on each other. It was all part of a carefully orchestrated plan to weaken American air power by causing friendly fire incidents. "Ghost 2, Argonaut Flight," Marcus transmitted. "We have been compromised. Someone's been feeding false information to our command centers to cause friendly fire incidents. All aircraft, weapons free on any non-American aircraft. The next few minutes would test every skill Marcus and Sarah had learned during their years of training. They were outnumbered, operating with compromised communications, and facing an enemy that had been planning this engagement for weeks or months. But they had one advantage their enemies hadn't counted on: the bond between two childhood friends who had found each other again in the most unlikely circumstances. The cartoon eagle that had saved their lives was about to become the symbol of their fight for survival. "Sarah," Marcus transmitted, "remember when we used to talk about flying together? I guess we finally got our chance." "I remember," Sarah replied, her voice steady despite the approaching danger. "Let's show these people what American pilots can do." As the enemy aircraft closed in, Marcus felt the familiar calm that,